Hello, everybody. This is Tina Salinas from We Are the Voice for the Silenced and Afflicted. I want to introduce Libby, who has a very traumatic story, and I will warn you, some of the details in this story you can definitely become very emotional with. She is dealing with, of course, the topic on everybody's mind lately, which is family court and CPS corruption, along with some severe incidents of abuse that have been going on for way too long, and she is seeking justice. Anybody that listens to these podcasts, we always ask, if there's any resources or information that you have that you can steer towards the parents, that would be useful. It's greatly appreciated. Libby, thank you for joining our show, and you have an amazing spirit. We've spoken briefly over the phone a couple weeks ago, and just the horrific stories that you have told me about. I can't even imagine and even understand and grasp my mind around how you are as strong as you are right now, but kudos to you. Definitely, I give you a big pat on the back.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. So go ahead, Libby. The floor is yours. You have an hour. If you need a little bit longer, more power to you. You can do that. We're here for you. We're here to listen. And again, anybody out there that is willing to give some advice or resources, please reach out to either herself personally or Libby personally or myself. Go ahead, Libby. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tina. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to have the chance to kind of put our story out there and explain, kind of what we've been through. So my name's Libby. Maybe a lot of people know me from social media. I have two children. My son is 9 and our daughter is 5. Basically, it starts about 15 to 17 years ago. I, met my husband at the time. We got married. Things were relatively normal, if not great, for a very long period. We tried very hard. I had trouble getting pregnant due to PCOS, which runs in my family. So we were married in 2006. Our son was born in 2011, and our daughter was born in 2015. And that took a lot just to be able to get pregnant on our own. However, in between our son and daughter being born, a couple things happened, just to give everybody a little bit of background. He's still my husband, technically. I filed for divorce back in 2019, but we haven't even got to that point in our story, in our process, I guess, if you want to say. And prior to that, things were great. He was a great father with our son when he was younger, and even with our daughter when she was a baby. But at some point things changed, and they changed drastically for the worse. And I don't know exactly when that happened. Although a lot of it kind of points back to, he had a back injury that led to surgery, and there was a predisposition in a prior, addiction history that had been kind of laying dormant, and he had been doing well with for years. But when he was prescribed narcotics for that surgery, I believe our son was like a year or two old. I don't remember exactly. Some things started to change. And with that kind of starts the story of what we've been through since. In 2018, I was strangled by my husband in our home, in the presence of our then 6-year-old son. Our daughter was upstairs sleeping. That strangulation was probably one of the most horrific incidents or situations or experiences of my life. Just following that, our son, our daughter, and I, we were effectively held hostage in a bedroom. We were locked in a bedroom. I barricaded the bedroom, got my daughter out of her room, and had the kids in the room, trying to keep them quiet. He had left after I was able to fight him off me from the strangulation. And long story short, he came back, he busted through the door. We were in there. He was throwing anything he could at us. It was very violent. It was very aggressive. It was very horrific. There was a second assault on December 14th of 2018, which wasn't strangulation, but was still just as traumatizing. And again, that second assault also was perpetrated in the presence of our then 7-year-old son, because he had a birthday in October. So there was that. I didn't report it at the time. I come from a family who doesn't divorce. I'm the first one to file for divorce in my family. And I felt like, in trying to be the good wife and keep things together, that I was doing what I was supposed to do. That became clearly evident that I was not making the right choice. It was the end of October of 2019. I filed for a PFA. And then about 3 or 4 days later, filed for divorce on November 4th. So to kind of just speed things up, because it's a very long, drawn out process, what we have with our case is kind of like the trifecta of bad situations, and it's gone from bad to worse to horrifying. So we have the strangulation, and we have the physical domestic violence that occurred in the home. There was also verbal abuse, there was psychological abuse, there was emotional abuse that happened to myself and to the children in the home. I have, since filing for divorce, sought and gotten a conviction for that strangulation. So he was convicted to, unfortunately, it was only misdemeanor 2 strangulation. It should have been a felony according to PA Act 111, but it wasn't. But there was a conviction on February 23rd of 2021, this year, for that strangulation as a crime of domestic violence. So we have that. Now, kind of moving forward, on January 5th of 2019, 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning, he walked out. He left us. He likes to call it a 6-month separation. Effectively, what happened, though, is he abandoned us for 6 months. My car had been totaled in December of that year. So, and I was a stay-at-home mom. He was the breadwinner, making very good money. We chose for me to stay home because that's what our decision was. So he walked out and moved in with his parents for 6 months in the middle. And we live in Pennsylvania. We were in we're in the Poconos, or we were. I want to apologize too. There is somebody here doing new gutters. They were supposed to be done by now, but they're clearly not. So I do apologize for any noise behind me. They should be done shortly. So, basically from there, he moved into with his parents for 6 months. For the first, I would say 3 months, at least until about March, we were without a car, initially without any money. He did give me access, agree to keep depositing his checks into our joint bank account, so I had access to money eventually. We had no oil in the tanks, no heat in the house. I was walking with our children about a half mile to 3/4 of a mile, maybe more, to the grocery store one way and back, to try to get groceries and carry them home. It was not a fun situation. During that time period, the children at the end of that started going for visitation with their father. I would say probably the last 7 to 8 weeks of that, which, I really had to kind of almost beg him for, because I was exhausted from doing it all on my own. But he did agree, and he took the kids, and they were seeing him, every weekend he was coming, or mostly. So we kind of move into June of that year. We agreed to try to give it one more chance. He moved back in. Things went from bad to worse. And not only did I realize at that point that things weren't going to get better, it didn't matter, how many times he apologized for the things he did and things he said. And, I'm sorry, I need help, give me another chance. He had been through an outpatient program, which he was discharged from. We ran the gamut. We were in marriage counseling, the whole 9 yards. So, we gave it a valiant effort, or at least I did. I don't know what his perspective is, and I can't speak for him on that. But then, as that summer and September, October started, encroaching and coming, I started to notice my children shutting down. My son would come home and get off the bus from school, and I would say, if Papa's home, Papa's here, and we just kind of have to, we would sit there. He would be in one room, we would be in another. The kids tried to avoid him at all costs, and it wasn't a happy home. It wasn't a happy situation. And I finally just realized that, as much as I'm trying to be the good wife and the good mother and keep this, kind of quiet within our little family, enough is enough, and I have to file for divorce. So I did.
And Libby, you're not the only person that, has been, and a lot of people don't realize that. They feel like they have to seclude themselves. They don't want family and friends to know about the abuse, because then you have that outlandish, character, right, and this outlook at yourself, or even as a family in general. So we kind of have to tend to keep it secretive. But like, it's not a shameful thing. I know it seems like it once you're out of the relationship, because you're like, oh my God, why didn't I just go get help as soon as possible? But unfortunately, that is a protective shield that we use.
It is.
To keep us safe.
It's a way of dealing with and kind of, protecting yourself, protecting your children. It's a kind of like a trauma. There's a trauma bond, but there's also like, this trauma fight or flight type of reflex that, you do what you have to do in the moment to try to get through that situation. And for different people, it's different things. It's
our comfort zone.
It is. It really is. And I fully agree. Absolutely. But so from there, I filed for divorce, and to be honest with you, Tina, like I never in a million years would have thought we would be where we are now then. Going into the divorce, obviously I was fully aware of the strangulation and then the second assault that happened. And those honestly were the only 2 times he got physical with me. There was other abuse, which is actually, as far as I'm concerned, and there's a lot of other people out there that I've spoken with too that feel the same way, that, the abuse that leaves the physical scars on the outside is bad. But when you're dealing with the emotional, the verbal, it leaves scars on the inside, and
that's lifelong.
Yes.
If we ourselves as adults are struggling with it, we can't even imagine. Not that we do it intentionally, and I've said this plenty of times before, any domestic violence victim is never doing it for their children to, have to witness something like this. But we have to understand it does affect our children as well, traumatically, and it represents them as who they grow into,
It is. And that's a huge part of what I want to get into. Once I kind of just give the brief on the background of our situation or our story here, that's actually a huge part of what I want to get into, the aftermath and the effects of even one exposure for one child to an instance of domestic violence. The effects are short-term, they're long-term, they're lifelong. And it's actually really, really scary. The data and the scientific, database and knowledge and that's out there at this point.
Right.
And that's just part of it, So, initially going into this, like, obviously I was aware of what went on in our home because I was there. And so in filing for divorce initially, I've been this way the whole entire time through this. I've advocated for him to get the help he needs. I've advocated for the addiction issues. There's not undiagnosed. There are diagnosed but unmanaged diagnosed mental health issues. And granted, that diagnosis is fairly old at this point. It was done when our son was I believe 2 or 3. But that was definitely done. He went in for an ADHD diagnosis and came out with that and something else. But at the same time, there's all different kinds of things that I think play into this. But the bottom line is I went into, and I have every single time since, into court advocating for him to get the help that he needs. Because at the end of the day, we have 2 children that we made together, and they need a father, but they don't need an unhealthy father. And I apologize if I'm getting emotional. It's
You're welcome to get your emotions out there. You have every right to.
Thanks. And it's hard. Because every time we went into court, I advocated for him to get help. And at this, when this started, I didn't know a lot of what I know now, which has changed things extensively, but still I'm kind of coming from the same place. Like, ultimately, at the end of the day, like, I would really like for him to get the help he needs so that our kids can start to heal and we can figure things out going forward. But that's just not happening. And what's happening is just such an atrocity and so scary for the children that we brought into existence.
And the sad thing in these situations, unfortunately, is once another spouse of what have you, whatever type of relationship you have, whatever it was, marriage, with kids, or once they receive that control, it's like their whole body is taken over with this different entity, and they have no care whatsoever of fear of consequences, accountability, or on any aspect of anybody else's emotions at that time, because that control has been given to them. Right. So even though you're searching and seeking, because we all know at the end of the day, of course, that's the only thing that's going to be beneficial in this relationship, for the children, he's never going to do it unless he really wants to. And that's the unfortunate part about it. And clearly,
that's the bottom line. Yep.
Right. And clearly, with the ongoing mishaps and discrepancies throughout the court, he is able to gain more control and more access to harassment and ongoing, this is the clincher, ongoing traumatizing and affecting these children in so many ways that he as a parent is not even fully grasping what he's doing to his own children. And that is the most unfortunate part of the situation, because you can talk to your blue in the face, and the courts can demand him to go to therapy and programs. And I've said this before, a lot of these abusers, a lot of these, harassers, they like to pacify the courts.
Right.
So in reality, who is it really helping? Here you go,
exactly
courts, here you go, courts, I'm doing exactly what you want me to do, but is he really taking it in? Is it really affecting him? Again, it's affecting the children a heck of a lot more, because this is molding them, for right. when they become older. This is, they always say that, what you teach your kids, when they get older, they become what they came from. They become that person that they were, whatever. Say if you instilled the Bible, or you instilled certain education programs in them, and once you instill that in that child, you're molding them,
Absolutely. And at such a young age too, like they're so formidable at this age. They're like sponges. And even when, you think they're not paying attention, or dealing with court things, and especially with, COVID and everything, everybody being on lockdown, trying to keep things that aren't for kids' ears away from kids' ears, but being on lockdown, not being able to go anywhere, send the kids to a friend's or to a sitter. I've been over backwards trying to do that. But even, the times that, we were together, in the home when things were toxic, they're picking up on it. And that's exactly right. Like, I couldn't agree with you more. And at the end of the day, there's a lot of choices to make, and things can be ordered, and you can be, with the criminal conviction, there were a ton of things ordered, batter's intervention. There was, a full psychological assessment, all these kind of things. But at the very end of the day, unless he truly wants to make the change, and he wants to admit the things that have happened and the things that have been done and the damage that it's caused, nobody's going to be able to move forward from this in a productive or positive way. It's not going to happen. And that really, really stings for our kids, because they don't understand, because it's like, well, why, and when, he doesn't come up very much in this household. The kids and I are in trauma therapy. They're with an amazing pediatric trauma therapist. We've all three been diagnosed with PTSD, anxiety, our son twice, because he was in therapy prior. Our daughter was too young. I've been under a therapist, or seeing a therapist, I guess, since well before any of this even happened, as it was happening and through this. And then just recently I switched to a more trauma-informed therapist that she's just been amazing. But, the kids talk about whatever they talk about in their therapy, and they go in individually. There's every once in a while, they might go in together, or we've had like one like family type of thing, but like that has been amazing for them. But at the end of the day, they don't understand why. So, we come back to, we've had all these things that happened. The children, there's been 2 separate disclosures of abuse by the children. With regard to the time that 6 or 7 to 8 weeks, I think it was, in 2019, when they were going every weekend or close to it with their father. There was a disclosure by both children in April of 2020 of abuse. And that was the first time that I had ever heard happen, and these things obviously spurred, the therapist had to, because she's a mandated reporter, had to call a referral in. And we live in Pennsylvania. Dad lives in New Jersey. So all these referrals have been called in, and to date, just to kind of make a long story short, we've had between the two states, I believe, 11 open and shut investigations, only one of which has been actually, a verified investigation. And it's really kind of frustrating because, we live in Pennsylvania, so all these different mandated reporters, and I think we're close to 20 different mandated reporters at this point, have called in and made referrals. And this has gone on for almost, just shy of 2 years, maybe 18 months with the actual CPS part of it. But
so are you saying that even with the disclosures from your children, that nothing has actually been done with them hearing this personally from them? Because last time I knew, they're supposed to have, this is what they demand. They demand for a proper disclosure, whether it be through a counselor or CPS hearing it. So you're basically saying that with all these disclosures that they've received, they've refused to do anything yet still with this.
They have. So the way this has worked is CPS opens up the investigation because the children and I live in Pennsylvania. And so everything's called in through Childline in Pennsylvania. CPS, with the exception of the very first investigation that was done, which was founded, there was 1 count of substance abuse towards our daughter, 2 counts of domestic violence, 1 for each child, and 2 counts of failure to protect, 1 for each child. However, that has been thrown out of court repeatedly as a not valid document or investigation. I'm not sure why. That same caseworker actually went into our very first custody conciliation conference and recommended nothing but supervised visitation, which was ignored. So throughout this process, CPS will open up, they'll close down citing we don't have jurisdiction because this abuse happened while the children were on visitation with dad in New Jersey. They'll call DIFUS, which is now DCP&P. They've changed their name due to a massive lawsuit kind of recently. So, then DCP&P picks that up. And to date, DCP&P has not done one thorough or complete investigation. I actually filed a 170-page complaint that was an evidence-backed and based complaint with the head of DCP&P in Trenton because of the fact that stated protocol was violated 6 different ways. And this was just in the first few investigations. Since then, there was a second disclosure in December of 2020, this past December, of additional abuse, sexual abuse. And that was handled slightly differently, but the children have now done 2 forensic interviews. Our son did the first one, and that was actually set up by the ADA in the criminal case to get information for the criminal case. And the second one, both children did, and that was in 2 separate counties in Pennsylvania.
And what's appalling is that, it's already traumatizing enough for what the children have to go through with the abuse and then have to deal.
Yes.
I know exactly from personal experience what a child has to endure when having to go through these physical forensic interviews. And that's something that neither a parent or a child will ever forget. That is stained into your mind.
Absolutely.
With those forensic, and I do apologize, for all the pain and the suffering that you and your children are going through. Every time I go over the story that you have told me after the couple weeks of us speaking, I just cry. I cry because it's shameful and it's disgusting and it's appalling and it's a form of sex trafficking and, ongoing abuse. And there is no reason that our children have to continue living like this and living in fear, especially when you have the proper parent that is willing to do everything in their possible way to make sure that the child is taken care of properly. So again, I do greatly apologize to you for what you've endured.
I appreciate
with that. You're welcome. And with that being said, with the forensic, did anything ever come about of that? Like, did they pursue any charges criminally against him, or what was the next step after that?
With the first forensic interview, that one was set up by the arresting officer for the strangulation case and the ADA for the county in that case. I was finally given a copy of that interview once he was sentenced and that was all closed. And I've watched that And nothing was brought up criminally with regard to anything else other than the strangulation that our son spoke about. Now, during the second CAC interview, the forensic interview that was done, I've repeatedly tried to get that. I have not been given access to that at this point. And nothing was done. That was, it was done in Pennsylvania, but immediately following that, which was, quite a horrific experience for both the children and I, we were told by the county caseworker that, we're washing our hands of this, was her exact words. It happened in New Jersey, so New Jersey's going to take this over. Well, there was the county prosecutor's office was involved, and I spoke with a detective from there. Eventually, long story short, nothing was done and the case was closed. And after, the children and I in August of last year moved out of the marital residence and moved into a home. And we are now under the address confidentiality program here in Pennsylvania, which is a program for survivors of domestic violence. So
hold just one second real quick, if you don't mind.
Sure.
With the forensic situation, I mean, I can't believe that they basically just told you to screw off.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way I can put it, unfortunately. Sorry, guys, but that's it. What they basically denied you your right to have any of the medical information providing within the situation at hand. What the heck is going on? I mean, were you able to speak to a supervisor or go beyond that measure in order to reach out to somebody that was willing to help you? I mean, you're being bounced around like a tennis ball here.
And that's what I feel like. And well, actually, it was my attorney at the time, who's still technically my attorney, I guess, because nothing's to my knowledge has been filed, but his office was the one that requested it. And according to him, they've requested it several times. I've been billed for them requesting it several times. But I haven't seen it. So it wasn't me directly that was requesting it, but that is something that here in the near future, I'm going to start reaching out and doing, because something's got to give here. Something's got to give.
But you still have legal rights over your children, correct?
I do. Absolutely.
And even when a parent, and I know this for experience, even a parent that doesn't have custody, they're still allowed to have some type of a certain degree of medical or schooling, records for their children. So, I mean, either way you look at it, you're still being denied, whether it's coming from your lawyer or somebody else that's on your side. I mean, I'm hoping potentially, somewhere down the line that you are able to gain access to that, because you legally do have a right to that, right, which might actually help your case a lot.
Absolutely.
A lot.
Absolutely.
Tremendously.
Well, and the kicker in this whole situation with that second interview is the caseworker from New Jersey who initially was hell-bent on coming to our home, which is a protected address. Like, we have a PO box that's, managed by the Office of Victim Advocate. The courts can't legally have it. Nobody can legally have it unless I give it to them. And it's backed by PA law. So this caseworker initially is like, well, I'm coming to the house to do a home check. I'm like, I'm sorry. Unfortunately, this is a situation. I'll take pictures. You can Zoom me. I'll walk around the house. You can look at my fridge. You can make sure the water's running and all the whole 9 yards. Eventually she agreed to not have to come to the house, which was very nice of her. But the long of the short of it is the very last meeting we had, where a friend of mine, an acquaintance of mine who had been extremely helpful in a lot of things that have happened. Because I got to the point where I was taking third parties with me, or I'm recording, or there's got to be some type of you have to. You do, because you never know. So the very last and we didn't know it at the time, but we met at a public park. I had a third party with me. The third party was recording. She's also actually a mandated reporter, which is kind of ironic in the situation. But, I have a video of that caseworker in this park stating, well, the children did disclose abuse. Dad said he didn't do it. So we're closing the case.
It amazes me how an abuser can just say, hey, I didn't do it.
Well, and that's been the MO this whole time. I didn't do it. It didn't happen. It didn't, like, the gaslighting is unreal. The projection.
But you have disclosures. You
Right.
have proper disclosures. You know, some people give advice and say, hey, take your kid aside and record it. You can't do that because it's not a
No.
proper disclosure. No matter how heartfelt and how emotional you are at that time, it's not proper. But you have the prime definition, not only with the doctors, with the counselor that are mandated reporters, with your daughter disclosing what's going on, and still because he states, hey, guess what, guys, I didn't do it. It's my word against theirs. This is what goes on. This is what continues.
And this is what continues. And, you know, you can hear me on that video, which, by the way, I've sent to the Deputy Attorney General of the state of New Jersey, along with 20 something other attachments showing breaks of protocol, breaches of this, you know, a different caseworker lying about not having collateral, and that collateral was actually that first CAC interview. And I have text messages where she is texting me, telling me she spoke with the arresting officer and knows how to get it. So how does it not exist, but you've been told how to get it? You know, it's just, it's asinine to me that these agencies, these, you know, organizations,
They're protecting each other. That's ultimately
and
what it is.
They're supposed to be set up to protect children. And what I found out through the multitude of phone calls I've made in this, including to a liaison for DCP&P, who's supposed to work for, you know, between parents and them with complaints, I was told, you know, unfortunately, ma'am, you know, our caseworkers don't have to have any type of formal schooling. They don't have to have any level of education.
Why? Because that would just help the kid. I mean, why would they dare go educate themselves on something?
Social workers, they don't even have to necessarily have a college degree, a two or four. You know, we accept people from all walks of life, is what I was told. Like, come on, you're giving these people, and I know our situation is different than a lot of people are experiencing where children are being removed on, you know, without warrant. And there's that whole aspect too. So, you know, there's two sides of this, and I don't see a lot of what we've gone through, but how are you allowing people, professionals, to make life altering, potentially, and most usually traumatic for the children decisions when they don't have to have any base level type of education experience? I mean, it's mind blowing. It is.
It's as simple. You're 100% right, and it's as simple as a paycheck. That's all it is. You don't need education to get a paycheck. You got drug dealers, right? You got drug dealers that go out on the street and peddle their drugs. Yeah. And do they got an education? Do majority of them do? No, some of them do, but you know that's not the point. Anyways.
Yeah, we're not using business degrees here. Well, and right. The fact remains too is that the part of this that makes it all that much worse is the Title 4D funding that is federally allocated and going to all these different states for CPS, DCP&P. You know, every state there's different, you know, acronyms for what they're called. But the Title 4D funding that's going to them, there are actually incentives to do things that are against what should be done. And that to me is absolutely horrific, due to the fact that I and our children as survivors of domestic violence, I can tell you I have made phone calls from the federal level down to the state, down to the county, down to the city, looking for resources at certain times. We had to move very quickly. We couldn't tell anyone.
There's not many.
There's supposed to be all this funding for domestic violence survivors, and we don't have any. I'm sorry, we can't help you. Stay safe out there. It's ridiculous.
You're right. And then they wonder why, and this is exactly why, for anyone that don't understand domestic violence victims, this is exactly why we stay in the situation that we're in at that time, because there are not a lot of programs or people willing to help. You know, once you do reach out for that help, then you have to worry about CPS being called. And instead of them helping, which should be another resource federally funded, instead of people helping with these domestic violence situations and parenting, they automatically peg you as a terrible parent and they yank your children away from you. So what do? Do you go seek this supposed help that is fraud and corrupted to where they're going to steal your child from you when you're doing nothing but trying to protect and get the help for them anyways in yourself? Or do you continue with the relationship and try to find out ways on your own to start all over again and have to blossom in a new life and transition in order to show the children, yes, it was an unfortunate situation, very traumatic, but we can get through this together. I mean, you can't grasp. It's like, and I've explained this before on another podcast, it's like when you speak to a addict. An addict wants to talk to somebody that actually went through it. Life situations. They don't want to hear somebody that read out of a book and said, hey, well, all right, I'm just going to nod my head and write down on a piece of paper, this is what you want to hear. Yeah. Exactly. But you are 100% right. There's not many programs out there at all for any of the victims. And then when you do seek help and you do get out, again, you're still pegged as now you're the protective parent. And I've noticed lately that this protective parent is going around viral things saying that too, where we are criminals. We're terrible. How dare you stand up for your children?
Without any criminal, we're labeled psychotic, we're labeled crazy, we're labeled unfit, we're labeled this, we're labeled that, without any evidence, without any substantiation, without any finding of facts. And we're labeled these things by people who have absolutely zero business making psychological assessments on anybody, because either they're attorneys or they're this or they're that, but or the opposing
lack
party.
Of education, like you said before.
Like to just go out and defame and to blurt this stuff out there. It's highly prejudicial. It sets a tone. And, you go into court, and as a victim, I know I go into court and it's really hard for me. Diagnosed PTSD, really high anxiety. A lot of our court has been virtual due to COVID, which is, it doesn't really matter either way. Obviously, in person is worse. But to be labeled all these things and have all this come at you for protecting your children, which is what, as a parent, you're supposed to do. Nobody wakes up and they say, I want to be abused, or I want my kids to be abused. As a parent, your worst nightmare is hearing that your children have been abused.
Exactly.
We do what we have to, because our children's voices are silenced. They're pushed down. It's almost like our children don't have rights, even though according to the Constitution, we're born with, unalienable rights. It's almost like they're just pawns in a game. And it's very unfortunate because, with the abuse, there's a lot to cover up. There's a lot to hide. But really, truly, at the end of the day, it's all these children that are really, really suffering. And that's the main, I think, point that it not even needs to be kind of driven home, because it is, because I know hundreds upon hundreds, and I know there's tens and tens of thousands of protective parents out there that are going through the same thing I'm going through, that you're going through, that everybody's going through. There's similarities, there's differences. Everybody's case is unique, but not. But at the end of the day, there's all these children that are either one of two things is happening. And these are not high conflict divorce cases. High conflict doesn't apply when domestic violence is put into the mix, and they get labeled that a lot. And it's just such an egregious label that I can't stand it. But you have, roughly 58,000 children a year that are court ordered back into the hands of their abuser, while, from the safety of the protective parent. Or you have a situation which, according to the Center for Judicial Excellence, their website, and I'm not going to exactly get the amount right, but it's been over 800, I believe, and 50 children since 2008 that have been murdered by an abusive parent that have been court ordered back into, some type of visitation situation. And the number just for this year alone is outrageous.
Have you seen the recent story? Well, it's not a recent story, actually. Have you seen the story of little James, the little boy that was...
right here. Yeah, yes, absolutely.
Unfortunately, the situation with him was absolutely horrible, and the mother is still, going viral with her story for justice. And I don't know if you've just seen the recent posts where she had put up some information where they basically declined any forensic information for her. They pretty much it was like the dad got away with it. You know what I mean? Like he simply just got away, and there's no baby that young or should have to ever endure something like that, and then die at the hands of the abuser, and then the abuser is not even held accountable. I would be furious.
He was just held. He was arrested on child endangerment,
not murder, not yep,
right.
Yep.
And then there's the other story of Corey down in Ocean County, New Jersey, where, and again, this is DCP&P, different county, but same state agency, where this mother repeatedly, please help me, please help my child. This isn't
with
okay.
Abuse, yeah.
And same thing happened. He was killed. He was killed, and there's no accountability. And I think that's the biggest thing here, is that there is a complete lack of accountability in this situation, and it goes from the bottom to the top. And there's different reasons, and every situation is different, and why maybe there's not. But that's the bottom line here, is that domestic violence abusers are not being held accountable for their actions, and it's almost a joke at this point. But what's really happening is we're going to end up with an entire generation, and then another, it's going to perpetuate forward of children who have gone through this, because it's happening, especially with COVID, at alarming rates. Like the domestic violence numbers have spiked because of COVID. And just like there's groups out there, that help people, there's groups out there that these abusers take advantage of, and they gain information and knowledge and realize that even with the articles that are in the newspapers against these judges or against the criminal, they realize that, this control is handed over to them. And they realize that, hey, if somebody else can get away with it, why not me? And that's how the abuse becomes 10 times worse, and a child has to continue enduring it because this pedophile or this abuser or whatever you want to call them for that point in time, because they're monsters in my eyes, however you look at it, they look at it as if it's a personal broadcast news station for educating them on how to continue abusing and hurting and harming. And it's sickening. It's like the cheat sheet in high school. Hey, so this person, and it's going on repeatedly. And like in our case, every time I turn around, like right now, there's additional laws that regarding weapons that my ex has violated. And there's it's a prosecutable thing, and I'm struggling to have charges brought on that. Not that they're not warranted or that the law doesn't say that they should be, and there's all kinds of different things that are going on with that. But it's time after time after time after time, and once you cross that proverbial boundary in the sand or the line in the sand, an abuser realizes, hey, I can do this. Okay, well, do I can do a little bit more. Do, and it's like
and that's what leads to murder.
It does. And no parent, no safe parent, and it's not always women. There are safe, fathers out there. Absolutely. It's not a gender thing. However, the numbers come up more often than not, or more unilaterally, that it's women.
And not many fathers want to talk about, not men. I shouldn't just say fathers, but not men.
There are a ton of amazing fathers out there, fathers who are active, who participate in even whether it's within like a solidified marriage or a separate situation, or maybe single fathers. It's not a slam this or slam that. I just know my situation, and I know from the immense amount of research I've done. But we as protective parents, all we want is for our kids to be safe. That's all we're asking for.
Right, it's not a secluded issue. It's definitely profound all over the place. And I actually have a young man that's coming on tomorrow for his story to be told. And we discussed today some of the situations, and like you're saying, and I'm saying, that some people are quiet because, especially when it comes to men, for some reason, they feel as if it's taken away from their manliness, or they just don't want people to look at them as if, oh, you were abused. It does happen. It's unfortunate, and it does happen, and it's very real, and it not only affects the men, it affects the child as well, or children at that situation. I know with your situation with your the abuser, you were saying that he did have charges on him, didn't he? He was on parole, or he's on probation, so he's not actually supposed to have any weapons. So in that situation, it's a little different, because although we do have an amendment, we have a right to bear arms, he's not supposed to because of the rules and guidelines that are put into place when you're on probation or parole. So he's not exempt from that, but unfortunately he feels he is.
In fact, it's not even, he's on probation because he had no prior record. But it's not even just the probation, it's the sentence itself because of the fact that it was a misdemeanor to strangulation, which was sentenced as a crime of domestic violence. That precludes him from having, owning, having, purchasing, or having access to weapons or ammunition. So, there were multiple weapons which were purchased. We lived in Colorado for a number of years, and they were purchased out there. And because I'm a bookkeeper and I save everything and document everything, I saved the original receipt from the handgun. I didn't have it. There was a Ruger rifle that he also had, and then a crossbow that was actually delivered on the day that I filed for the PFA. So those weapons, due to Act 79 in Pennsylvania, which went into effect in April of 2019. Now the PFA that I applied for was in October. So we're talking like 6 months later, maybe. Act 79 changed a couple things. One, it went from 30 days to hand everything over to 24 hours. And it also took away the option to give your weapons over to a third-party friend or family member through a safe handling process. However, Act 79 was completely ignored in this situation. He went in, he originally signed an affidavit stating he had never owned any weapons. That I don't know what happened to it, but the sheriff's deputy that called me on that and said, well, he's saying he never owned any. He just signed an affidavit. I said, well, I have the original receipt with his signature on with the date and the place that he purchased the handgun. From there, and it's been a 2-year thing. Those weapons were finally, according to what I've been told, confiscated in March of this year. Even though for 18 months at that point, I've been asking, where are the weapons? Where are the weapons? Where are the weapons? Now, at this point, there are violations. I've been pushing to have charges done on that, which, some of that I can talk about, some of it I can't. However, no, he's not supposed to be in any possession or access of weapons. And he's living in a home where weapons were confiscated when I filed for a PFA against our daughter, trying to protect our daughter, which
so it's pointless.
Kind enough to add our son onto for me. It was a temporary and then was dismissed. However, there were weapons in the home. So he's still living there. He's not allowed, as per his sentence, to live there.
And he can have access to them pretty much whenever the heck he feels like it, and then turn around and say, again, it's not me. It wasn't me. I don't have access. There you go.
And it blows my mind that all they have to say is, I didn't do it. And that's it. But us as victims of repeated domestic violence, abuse, neglect, and all these different forms of this, it's like, here's evidence, here's evidence, here's evidence, so like going into family court, we have a conviction. We have a criminal conviction to strangulation, which there's more information out there scientifically now on strangulation than there's ever been before. And what that means, in that moment, that abuser has your life literally in his hands. And once you're strangled, you tend to kind of bow down and comply a little bit because, at that point what that person's capable of. It's horrifying. It's degrading. It's violating. It almost took my life, and it almost took my life in front of our son. And that's
pretty much what it does. It emotionally scars you.
It does. It does. We've got the criminal conviction. We've got all three of us formally diagnosed with PTSD and anxiety. We've got the children and I living in a confidential address through the Office of Victim Advocate, which is not a social club. It's the requirements to get into this program are really, really stringent, and it's not fun. We get mail to our house, like first class mail, but we can't get packages. I used to order from like one of those ugly food things where you can, get the I don't know,
the meat boxes and stuff.
Yeah. I can't do that anymore. Like when my family sends Christmas presents, they can't come here. The school, sends and we can't tell, the kids are finally making friends and moving out in life, not moving out, but, like branching out socially. And we can't tell people where we live. Their friends can't come over. It's almost like a mini witness protection. And while it's kept us safe so far, the limitations on it are just, they're almost debilitating. It's taken a lot of our freedom away. It's taken a lot of our life away. And it's really frustrating because at the end of the day, we did nothing wrong. We've done nothing wrong. I've told only the truth throughout this entire thing. I've done nothing but try to fight to keep our kids safe. I've advocated for our abuser to get the help he needs, regardless of his refusal to do so. And it boils down to at the end of the day, and I hate saying this, I hate this phrase, but it's not fair. It's not fair. I know life's not fair. I get it. But kids need to be kids, and human beings need to be human beings. And to have to live in fear every single day is in that fight, flight, or freeze type of mode it's no way to live. It's no way to live. And for what? Because nobody will hold him accountable. I mean, it blows my mind on a daily basis.
It's more so just the racketeering. Again, that's pretty much what it goes down to it, because they realize that, we as protective parents are going to continue coming into the courts to protect our child or children. And instead of them doing the exact purpose of what they took their oath for, they're doing the total opposite. They're not helping. They're endangering mentally and physically welfare of our children, us as parents. They're stripping our rights away from us. They're stripping our own children's rights away from us. The integrity alone. And these kids are subjected to ongoing mental, emotional trauma that, again, like I said earlier, is going to wind up molding them as who they are when they get older. Hopefully, majority of the children can come out of it as long as they have loving and compassionate people that are willing to stand up and fight for them. But then you have the very few, or even saying few is a terrible thing. I would say there's very many actually that don't make it out and aren't as lucky. Even as the parents, there's a lot of parents that I speak to, and some of them are just like, I'm ready to give up. I've had enough. It's a tiresome road. And we got to keep pushing, and we have to train our children, and we have to teach our kids at a young age about life, that in certain situations that they shouldn't even be knowing, but unfortunately with the world that we're living in right now, that's the only best hope that we have. Nobody else is going to teach our kids. It's one thing from teaching them the ABCs to, okay, well, now you got to put your shoes on and, go out there and go into school and learn about, signing your name or science, math, whatever you want to call it. But now we have to say, all right, your ABCs, now guess what? It's not a pretty world out there, and now I have to teach you about protecting yourself emotionally and physically. And if somebody says something... Right, and if somebody does something to you, you have to teach them to stand up and speak up. And it's very hard. Like, I've even had this conversation with my little 5-year-old recently, and it's very hard because, again, I'm very cautious with what I say to my child, because they are very easily manipulated, and you can influence them in the wrong way just with the wrong sayings. So I have to teach my child that, it was his first year of kindergarten, and I go, you're going to have a great time. You're going to meet new friends. You guys are going to sing and dance, and then he'll go, well, it's scary. It is very scary. Yes, I'm not going to lie to my son. Yes, it is very scary, but it's new. And once you realize that it's safe and there's people there that are there to help you, he has to understand the differences in everyone's role that plays in his life, even at 5 years old, which is it's a lot. Okay, it's overwhelming. But I have to also let him understand that, you're going to make friends because there's good people in the world, and then there's going to be bad people in the world. So there might be some people that are going to be nasty to you. Do I want to sit there and have that conversation with my 5-year-old? Of course not. Do I have to? Of course I do. Yeah. And I have to continue going on with saying, now this is what you do. If something bad happens, you have to stand up, and you have to say, if you see somebody bullying somebody, or if you see somebody picking on you, and you have to implement that in them early. So then when they become older, and then God forbid situations like this happen, they have that strength and they have that courage to come out of that shell and say, I'm not going to be scared. I'm going to do right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's a
Exactly.
lot. And it's, it's really unfortunate because, at this age, at such a young age, I think teaching critical thinking as one of the most important things you can do. As somebody who grew up, hearing the phrase, if you see something, say something, stand up, do something, you'll be helped. The system is there. It will, it protects domestic, you grow up and this is ingrained in you. And then all of a sudden one day you're sitting there like looking around you and holy moly, like it's not the way that I was taught. It's not the way that it's presented to be. And to have to even like address these issues with kids at such a young age on obviously a very age appropriate level is a lot. Yes. But it's unfortunate because at the end of the day, it wasn't me that caused this. I didn't ask to be abused. I didn't ask for them to be abused. There were choices made, and those choices weren't made by myself or our children. And unfortunately, we're the ones that are left on a daily basis to deal with the aftermath and the trauma, which, God, I mean, I'm sure you can relate. It's extensive, and every child is different and every child handles it differently, and age has a lot to do with things. But, I'm at a point where there's so much recent and current scientific data and information out there. There's the Meyer study. Joan Meyer did a study for that looked at about I think it was like 240 cases of custody when domestic violence or abuse was disclosed, and then when you have sexual abuse disclosed, and then we bring in the whole aspect of parental alienation when the abuser claims parental alienation as a kind of a way to hopefully loop around the accusations of abuse, and the insane amount of protective parents that lost custody, and the children ended up going back. I mean, you've got the Saunders study, which goes through and discuss how the family courts are getting it all wrong. There's not enough education. Domestic violence isn't really being seen for what it is. It's not being held at a level that it should be at this point. And there's, children are the ones that are suffering. You've got, the ACEs, which our children are an 8 out of 10 on the adverse childhood experience score. They're an 8 out of 10 due to the fact that we have, the lethality. There's a lethality assessment risk program through the Office of Victim Advocate. I'm a 9 out of 11 on that because I've done everything I shouldn't have with regard to keeping myself and our children safe, as opposed to, doing what I, according to an abusive person, I shouldn't have done. So we're at risk here. And, I'm not trying to take anything from anybody. I'm trying to keep our children safe, which is at the end of the day what both parents should be doing. Unfortunately, that's not the case here. And ultimately, when it all is said and done, I wish nothing more than none of this happened. However, it's happened. We can't undo what's been done, but we can make better choices going forward. And I hope that's done by the people that can make these choices to help keep these children safe. And if he's not going to, kind of hold himself accountable, or nobody else is going to hold him accountable, then there's a certain process and procedure that needs to happen here. But at the end of the day, these kids need to be protected and they don't need to go through anything more. However we get to the point of safe, healthy children is what I'm for. There's multiple avenues to get to the same point. And really, I look forward to the day where I can just be mom again and our kids can just be 5 and 9 or just kids again.
Amen to that. I definitely fully agree with that. And I think the most upsetting part about it is, like what we were saying earlier, is that it ultimately comes down to education. But then again, at the same time, a lot of these judges and these attorneys and these people that deal with children, it doesn't take a brainiac or a scientist to have even a full college degree to understand what's plain as day. I mean, I've been dealing with a lot of stuff is just as well as you and many other parents, and I'm pretty sure the majority of us have went on Google and found out a lot of our information just to go, wait a minute, I've never heard of even parental alienation. What the heck? Like, I dealt with the signs, but I didn't know at that time exactly what it was until I looked it up, and I'm like, oh my God, this is actually happening. So if we can do it for ourselves to self-educate, and research, I'm pretty sure these judges are full aware. It's just they choose to sweep it under the rug. Again, it's a money train, and it's all for the greed of money. And the only way that this is going to get fixed is we're not going to be able to go and flick them in the ear and say, hey, listen to us. The only thing that's going to change is us as parents standing up for what's right, getting loud, going out there and protesting, doing events, doing petitions, backing each other up, because we can conquer in numbers. We do have the right. If something's not proper and they're not abiding by these rules and they're getting paid, as we know, federally funded paid, there's something that we could do. We can do about it. It's just, what avenue do we take as parents? Because we're trying, and it's like, who are the right people? I don't know about you, but I've tried to reach out to certain attorneys, and certain attorneys will turn you down depending on the judge you're talking about or the situation. If it has anything to do with a biased judge, everything you talk about is basically thrown out the window. It's like they don't even want to touch it. And then you're like, okay, I didn't even finish my story to let you know that not only is there a biased judge, but there's proof here showing that a child is being abused and nothing's being done. So many civil so many civil violations are going on right here, and there's nobody willing to help. So then how do you make that stand? What is your next step? What I mean? Like, what do we do?
It's so difficult. And that's kind of exactly what I'm dealing with right now, is the fact that I am in the process of searching for a new attorney. My last attorney kind of bombed my case and messed up a subpoena and some motions for transcripts. And then, long story short, I'm looking for a new attorney. So that's one of the things. But there's just such a lack of domestic violence informed, I want to call them like safe attorneys that are out there that are willing to actually go and advocate for you. And they're supposed to advocate fiercely. Like, there's every state has their own attorney ethics. And that hasn't been happening in our case. And this is now my third attorney, and I'm looking for number 4. And each and every time it's one thing after another. And honestly, I document really well. I present really well, except in court, I freeze, which, but I need somebody to help me with that. And it comes down to the point that, you go through this and you just want somebody to help you to advocate for the safety and well-being of your children. And it's so hard at this point to find somebody that is willing to take on or willing
stand
to
up and do what's right. That's basically what it's right. Yeah,
it is.
Yeah, that's basically what it is.
It is. And I'm very fortunate because just very recently I have had a very informational, very well-known, informative advocate and expert witness who has agreed to come on to our case, which is amazing. But at the same time, he has to be able to work with an attorney. And I'm not an attorney. I know our case, frontwards, backwards, and in my sleep, but I go into court, I'm faced with my abuser, whether it's over a screen or in person, and I freeze. I've done it a million times. I walk out, I shoulda, I coulda, and it's that PTSD, and the PTSD doesn't come from nowhere. All these things, the conviction, the address confidentiality, all these things that haven't happened in line for a reason. It's not just like poof, magic wand and make these things appear. They're there, they've happened, and they've occurred for well-documented reasons. And, it just goes back to, I think so many of us out there just need a voice. And I really appreciate you doing what you're doing, because literally, you're giving us a voice, because when we are silenced, when we're hushed, our feelings, our experiences are invalidated and just, spun and gaslit, and all these things that are done to us on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis. And some of us, I've only been doing this almost 2 years. I know people that have been in 4, 8, 10, 12, and we're still going. And it's mind blowing. It is absolutely mind blowing. And something needs to give. And I've always said that there's strength in numbers and it takes a village. And I think the more of us that start to speak out in a positive way about the very detrimental experience we've gone through, maybe more people will feel, safe enough to do so, even if it's not publicly, maybe privately. And we have to kind of band together in this, because at the end, and I keep going back to this, but at the end of the day, there are so many children that are on the losing end of this stick. I mean, I can withstand a lot, like, and I've been pushed to the limits over and over again. And I've found strength I didn't know I had. I'm sure, like a lot of people out there. But at the end of the day, kids can only deal with so much. They can only comprehend so much. And so much of what they're having to deal with, for abuse situation or a detrimental situation during these young and informative years, is so imprinting on them that it's something needs to happen, and something needs to happen soon, because we're about to have an entire generation of children that are going to be just affected in ways that is going to be an unforeseen force.
Yes, definitely. I couldn't agree with you even more. And, you're welcome. And I tell everybody out there, definitely you're welcome. I also explain that you guys are helping me just as well. A lot of people don't realize that I used to crawl into my room and do nothing and cry all weekend when my son goes for weekend visits. It's still emotional because, unfortunately, he's still subjected. So the fact that I'm able to do this is not just, one-sided. It definitely helps me out as well, and I fully appreciate it. Excuse me, sorry. For people to come out, and you're right, to tell their testimony and to say, listen, I've had enough. We don't understand as individuals. We are put through things for a reason, and of course we don't understand the reasoning behind it, and why we're being hurt or feel tortured or put through pain and struggle and strife. But they're there for a reason, and each and every one of us has a talent or a gift. And if we can pull each other out of those holes, say for instance, you could be gifted to write up stipulations or petitions or authoring a book, or a journalist, that might be something that you would be wonderful doing, but that would be a major part of a group or a movement. And that's what people and parents need to start understanding, is that while we're hiding and in secret in our holes and sad and going through our PTSD and our depression that we've been labeled, or yes, unfortunately, it is very true and very real, we can be leaning on each other for help. And our talents and our gifts that we have can really make such a big impact, and actually pull this together. I just spoke to another young woman a couple days ago, and I go, so far through my journey, I've met a lot of people, and I'm very thankful for them. But so far in my journey, I've met 4 very, very strong women. You included. You're included in that.
Thank you.
But very,
that's an honor.
You're welcome. You're very,
likewise.
You're thank you. But I think it's not just their story that stands out. It's the personality, the demeanor behind it, the strength behind the pain, the non-scripted, if I may put it that way. When somebody's in pain and they're living it, they don't need a script. They don't need to write anything down. It's that pain that's coming from the heart, and that's actually what's driving you and pushing you with that. And I'm sorry.
I said it just goes kind of constantly, almost like a reel to reel. Like it's just there.
Yeah, it is. And there's just been, so far there's been a few, but I was speaking to her the other night, and I was just like, I would really like to come together to try to come up with something. I don't know, because I'm not creative yet, but I just know there's 4 individuals that stick out to me right now that I feel if we do something, it could be very powerful and moving. Always up for suggestions, and of course if other people want to include themselves, that would be great. But we do have the power within us to change. We just have to pull it out, and we have to lean on each other. We've grown up to realize that through all of our pain and our strife, that's what we're supposed to do, is shelter our feelings and not wear our heart on our sleeves, because the more we do, the more we get hurt. We have to start learning how to do the total opposite and realize that these abusers are the users and the abusers. They're the ones that we should be looking at. They should be scared of us. We shouldn't be scared of them no more. They have their time and their carpet and their stage rolled out for them. It's our turn to shine. It's our turn to stand up and pull that lion out of us and say, listen, you know what? You're going to go down. We got to start believing it. You're going to go down. You might have got away with it for so long, but there's going to be a time that we're going to give you a complete halt, and they're not going to know what's going to hit them. But again, we need to rely on each other, because that's the most important part when it comes down to this, because these corporations and these programs and these judges and these law guardians clearly could care less. They could care less. It doesn't matter to them. It's not their life. It's not their children. Again, it's just a paycheck. So we have to do something to move forward with this. Is there any advice that you want to give to anybody?
I guess I would say, you never know how strong you are until being strong is the only choice you have. You're not alone. There's literally thousands of us. Just keep fighting, because the truth eventually will win out. I have to believe that at some point justice will be served. And just that there's strength in numbers. There's absolute strength in numbers. And we can grow so much as human beings from the pain and the trauma that we've been through. You can either let it eat you alive, or you can let it help you grow as a person. And really, truly, at the end of the day, know that you're doing the right thing for your children, because they depend on you. And something has to give here soon. It really, truly does.
That's amazing. Yes, definitely. And hopefully somebody will take that advice and come out of their shell and reach out. And whether it's myself or whether it's Libby, because we're all open for
Absolutely.
Messages or suggestions. Also, we're all willing to have resources forwarded to us as well that might help in our situations, or maybe others that we can forward and share on our pages. Libby, was there anything else before we close out that you wanted to speak about?
No, not really. I think we touched on, a lot of the important stuff, and or most of the important stuff. And really, just at the end of the day, it's about children and needless trauma. And as long as I think as we kind of try to start standing together more and speaking up and trying to find this justice for our children and the help and the resources out there to keep them safe, at some point we gotta get somewhere. But really, it comes down to protect your kids, and what you're doing. If you're a protective parent, you're doing the right thing. As hard as it is any day of the week or year, keep doing what you're doing, because you're doing something right.
Most definitely. Those are definitely encouraging words, and I appreciate you being here as a guest on our show. I'd like to keep in contact with you, and maybe in a couple months, hopefully, we believe and we're praying for you that things will change and move in your favor. I would like to do an update with you, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Just to touch bases. I think, and I was giving this advice by another parent, which I fully appreciate. I think not only just us touching the bases on the bad and what we're going through, although it's very informative because people need to know and understand, I think it's also very helpful to hear updates on other people and their stories to give people hope and to believe that, yes, although through my struggle and my strife, I was able to pull out of it and hopefully help, which might lead somebody else in the right direction.
Yeah.
None of us are lawyers.
Yep.
Right, exactly. None of us are lawyers, or private investigators or anything like that, but we are parents that are going through the same thing, and we're willing to put the good fight out there. So anybody that's willing to reach out to myself or Libby, you're more than welcome to. Libby, thank you again. I appreciate your opportunity for us listening to your story, and I really, really hope to God that you get the help you need. Everybody, you're welcome. Everybody, thank you so much. Tina Salinas from We Are the Voice for the Silence and Afflicted. I just wanted to remind you that on change or care2.org, I do apologize. I keep saying that every time because originally I had my petition on that site. But on care2.com, I have a petition for Malachi's Law, which is designed specifically to protect CPS or child protective. I'll get it out right, guys. Sorry. Child abuse and domestic violence victims. It is specifically designed to protect them in the family court and CPS setting. So if you can go on care2.com and check out Malachi's Law, I would fully appreciate the support. Again, this is Tina Salinas for We Are the Voice for the Silenced and Afflicted, and I fully appreciate everybody. You're all warriors in my eyes. So God bless and have a good night. Thank you again, Libby.
Thank you, Tina. I appreciate the opportunity.
Bye-bye.
Bye.